Do you recognize the sound? Chances are you probably don't. It's an emergency siren used when there is a problem at a nuclear power plant. Specifically, it's the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Middletown, Pennsylvania. 2009 marks the 30-year anniversary of the 3 Mile Island, often called TMI, nuclear accident. The younger generation thinks TMI means too much information. The older generation, however, knows that TMI was the worst nuclear-related accident in the United States. On March 28, 1979, around 4 a.m., human error caused an automatic plant shutdown. Systems were working as they should have to prevent major damage from happening. The real problem occurred when a pressure relief valve got stuck in the open position, thus releasing more pressure than it should have. Tom Kaufman was an auxiliary operator at the time of the incident. He got to work about 2 hours after, and he recalls what it was like entering the plant.
When I got out of my car, I heard the station emergency alarm going off, and it was on constantly as I checked through security. And I remember the security guard who was patting me down, and he said, "Oh, they're having some problem down in Unit 2." It was definitely an understatement.
This particular plant, engineers call a high-pressure system, meaning there needs to be a lot of pressure to operate correctly. But if there's too much, safety valves open to drop the pressure. The incident occurred because of a stuck open valve causing the pressure to drop too low. In addition, an indicator told operators in the control room that the valve had actually shut. Problems just mounted on top of that. When your instruments don't work properly, Kaufman says it's very hard to fix a problem. Kaufman realizes now that these operators were faced with problems they had never seen before.
They were so confused at one point, the emergency system's high-pressure injection system, we call it, that pumps cool water directly into the core, turned on. And they saw it turn on, and they were so confused they actually turned it off, which exacerbated the problem.
Despite the dangers, former security guard Ralph DeSantis remembers an atmosphere of professionalism and calm at the plant. He says at one point the control room operators actually had to wear respirators, which was kind of scary to some. Also, wearing a respirator made it very difficult to communicate. DeSantis is now the site communications manager for 3 Mile Island. He says one of the biggest downfalls of this whole incident was the lack of communication between the control room, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the media, and the public.
The most accurate information was right here. The further away you got from 3 Mile Island, the more rampant the rumors were and the more quantity of misinformation was.
Kaufman didn't have any fear while he was at the plant. He believed that the people on site could handle the problem. His fear came from the media.
I felt more afraid when I went home and watched television, and things were being so exaggerated. I can remember I called the control room and said, they said this and this and this is happening. And the control room would get back to them and say, well, no, everything's cooling down, everything's trending in the right direction.
The lack of communication was such a problem during the accident that it almost caused the evacuation of an entire county. Gene Foreman was the managing editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer during the time of the accident. He feels that the utility company was at fault when giving out its information.
General Public Utilities, which was the company that owned 3 Mile Island, was very difficult to deal with. They were very hard to get information from. I really think that they would give us disinformation.
Foreman was proud of his journalists because no one opposed to going out to Middletown to cover the story. He even recalls the people living in the area were not very concerned.
But people, I think, surprisingly took it pretty well in stride. There was not a lot of panic, as I recall.
Kaufman, however, remembers something a little different.
I drove through Middletown. There were people that just dropped everything and left. Their doors are open, their TVs are on. They just left.
Many people are surprised to find out that if operators had just left the plant alone, the built-in safety systems would have worked as they were supposed to, and the incident would have been avoided, according to professional investigators. But like Kaufman says, they were unprepared for what they were up against, and while some may look at this as a horrible incident, people like DeSantis believe that it was a good thing, because it was a great learning lesson for everyone.
Truth and correct information was probably the only fatality of the accident.
Todd Beaver is currently training to become a control room operator supervisor at 3 Mile Island. He feels the same way, because he knows that the accident 30 years ago has prompted safety and security not only among his plant, but the other 103 nuclear reactors around the country.
We're the #1 example of why we need to follow procedures and stuff like that. It's always mentioned probably at every plant when it comes to procedures and safety.
Beaver says the training has increased greatly since the accident. Every plant has an off-site mock-up control room which is designed to look exactly like the one inside the actual plant. Once operators have finished their training, they are required to go through additional training every 6 weeks, in which they are put through accidents that are theoretically impossible just to prepare for the absolute worst. Kaufman says that although the accident did ruin a very expensive power plant, it was also a slap in the face of the industry. He believes that support of the people is built on trust, and after TMI, safety has become the #1 priority of any nuclear facility. This is why the nuclear industry has one of the highest safety records of any industry in this country, according to the Nuclear Energy Institute. Polls are constantly being done that ask about nuclear power, and they show an increasing trend of favoring nuclear power over the more polluting gas and coal plants. Both Kaufman and DeSantis mention recent polls done about Three Mile Island, and boast the excellent support the people have of the power plant. Right now, America has 104 operating nuclear reactors, supplying the United States with 20% of its electricity. According to the Nuclear Energy Institute, a new generation of reactors with increased safety systems and a higher electrical output are scheduled to be built in the states of Texas and Florida. Where will nuclear power sit in the future mix of this country? Only time will tell. For Com Radio, I'm Richard Milano.